Jenny Robertson, founder of the On Purpose Woman Global Community and founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. I'm here to share the speaker portion of our Connections Over Coffee gathering of the On Purpose Woman Global Community. Emily Shull is speaking on the science behind transformative moments. Emily is a holistic money coach and founder of Me, Myself, and Money. She helps you to understand and heal your relationship with money so you can attract, keep, and enjoy money without the anxiety or overwhelm. Emily does this by guiding you to the emotional root of your unease with money, and she's known for her calm voice, non-judgmental manner, and ability to help you realize a more peaceful relationship with money and with herself. And her website is Me, Myself, and Money, and it's also in the text of this video. So welcome, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
And
I'm really excited to share this information today. I'm going to start with a story of a really early client that I worked with. So about 4.5 years ago, when I was first getting started, one of my first clients, and it was actually a couple. I'll call them Marcus and Marie. And actually, Marie was the one who had a lot of a difficult relationship with money, just a lot of heaviness, a lot of experiences from earlier in life that she was still carrying around with her. And her fiance came along for the ride, very willing participant. They also wanted to understand their own and each other's money stories better for when they got married and started making decisions together. I just mentioned that because the real epiphany in our work together really came with Marcus and not Marie. So one of the first things that I do with clients when I work with them one-on-one is I have them fill out a money biography where they fill in all of their money memories with the emotions that are associated with them. And the point of that exercise is to go through that with them to see all of the patterns that have emerged with money. And most importantly, to find what the root cause of that is so that we can get to the root, understand it, heal it at that level so that the pattern is no longer active in their lives. And when I read Marcus's biography, something that struck me right away was that he had this pattern of whenever he was in a difficult financial situation, he would not share that with anyone, including his parents and including his fiance, even though especially his parents were in a space where they could have helped him financially, and they were willing to help him as well. And so at some point, for example, he was, they were both graduate students at the time. And at one point, he didn't have permanent housing in the summer, and he was just sleeping on friends' couches and really scrounging for food. And so it was really very unpleasant situations, and it didn't have to be that way. And so I brought up this pattern and I asked him about that, and he kept saying, I just didn't want to be a burden to them. Yeah, it was difficult for me, but I just didn't want to be a burden. And so I asked him, where he thought this originated from. And he thought about it, but he didn't know. And so I shared my screen and I brought up part of his money biography where he wrote that at the age of 13, he realized for the first time that his younger brother, who had cancer, that his family were spending a lot of money on his treatments. And so as a result, he made the conscious choice to try to minimize his needs, his financial needs, so that he wouldn't be a burden to his family and that his brother could get the help he needed. And when he saw that, he got quiet and kind of like really still for a few moments. And then, I said, do you think it could be this? And he kind of cocked his head to one side and was just kind of staring, and then said, I just never made that connection before. I just never thought of it that way. I didn't know that this event was related to all of that. And that, I just thought, oh, wow, that's really remarkable that he could have this autobiographical knowledge about himself, but not know that this was related. And so the session was coming to an end. And then the next time I met with both of them, at the beginning of the session, he said, Emily, I have to tell you, Since we last met, I checked my account last week and I had a negative balance. Something happened. I don't know why, but it was negative. But I picked up the phone and I called Marie, and she was able to Venmo me some money. And so I thought, wow, that is really remarkable. This really long held pattern seems to have evaporated. It no longer is true. So I was really excited about that. And that led me to do some research, that and some other client experiences that I had. I had a very similar experience with another client that did not result in this change. So I just got curious about, well, why is this happening? What is behind this? And how can I create more opportunities where my clients can make these connections? And also, selfishly, how can I have these opportunities for myself too? Because I love to learn more about myself and to, solve these problems that I've had in my own life. So I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides, but it's kind of a lot of information. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will maybe see them. If you do have a question, just put a Q or the word question in front of it, just so I know that I can see that right away. All right, so most of the information that I'm sharing, it comes from my experience with clients, and oh, can you see my screen with the slide? Yes, okay, great. My experience with clients, and from these two sources, Unlocking the Emotional Brain by Bruce Ecker, and then that I read a couple of years ago. And then more recently, earlier this year, I did a course with Julianne Taylor Shore. She goes by Jules. And she did this course that's available on Therapy Wisdom, which was remarkable. Okay. So as I said, I was really curious that Marcus had this autobiographical memory of himself. When I was 13, I realized that my parents had to pay for my brother's cancer treatment. Yet he had no idea that that experience led to this emotional memory that if I take my parents' money, my brother won't get treatment and he'll die. So learning about memory reconsolidation helped me realize how you can have these two things very separate, and also helped me realize what this emotional memory is, how it's formed, and how it can be changed. So it starts with how the brain works. And I'm just going to give you a very quick tour of the brain. Many of us know all this already, but just as a recap, that we have three distinct functions in our brain. The brain stem, which helps with all of the automatic processing of the body, the breathing, heart rate. It simply keeps us alive. Digestion, we don't consciously think, oh, I just ate, I need to digest my food now. Our body just handles that automatically. Then there's the limbic system, and this system has all to do with creating emotional learnings, emotional knowings. I'll use those two terms probably interchangeably, emotional learning or emotional knowing. And that is, that's the thing that keeps us from doing what we want to do or prevents us from doing what we need to do. So the limbic system, it's not at one particular area of the brain, but it's the parts of the brain that work to process our emotions and stores our memory. And the job of the limbic system is to keep us safe. So it will make decisions for us in order to keep us safe. And those decisions later no longer apply, but our limbic system doesn't know that, and it keeps us on this cycle of automatic behavior that's no longer serving us. And then the most recently developed part is the neocortex, and this is responsible for reason, logic, consciousness. The neocortex is very helpful in the modern world, of course, but when you are trying to unlock an emotional learning, the worst thing you can do is try to think your way through it, because that will never work. Instead, you need to feel your way through it. as I'll show. And just again, to reiterate, the limbic system, this is the part that generates emotional knowings. And if it's helpful to have these slides, you can send me an email. I'm happy to send them to you. All right, so I'm going to go through how an emotional knowing gets created, and I'm going to use an example from another client just so you can see how it kind of paralleled Marcus's journey, but that it ended very differently. So how an emotional knowing is created. The first step is that a negative emotional event occurs. So in Anne's case, her birthday was coming up. She was 5 years old, and she asked for a gift. And her mother yelled at her and said, "No, you can't ask for a gift. That's rude. Don't do that." I should mention that when Anne started working with me, her presenting problem, one of the issues that she wanted to work on, was that she had her own business, but had a hard time charging what she was worth. So she was having difficulty bringing in the income that she needed. So that's why this memory stood out to me right away when I saw this in her money bio. So the second step, the limbic system then senses danger. Anne's heart probably increased when her mother yelled at her, and she thought, "Oh, I did something wrong. Something's wrong here." Then the emotion and physical sensation that she has are recorded. So in that moment, Anne was probably feeling afraid, ashamed, probably felt some sensation in her stomach, like a stomach in a knot. And her brain, the limbic system, was recording all of this to use later so that she would not feel this danger. Next, the brain generates a belief or a meaning from the situation. And this is one reason why this often happens in childhood. Not always, but very often these emotional learnings happen in childhood because we have a much more limited experience with the world. We can't make sense of things as an adult can, so that our brain is just trying to make sense of them in whatever way it can to keep us safe. And so her brain decided that the meaning here is you can't ask for what you want, because if you do that, people aren't going to like you. It's not safe for you to do that. You're going to become abandoned if you do that. The brain then looks for evidence to confirm the belief, because our brain is always looking for information to update how we should behave. When I am on a Zoom meeting, knowing from past Zoom meetings, I'm supposed to behave in a certain way. If something drastically different happened, my brain would take notice and say, "Oh, that's different." And if it happened again and again and again, my brain would update that information. And so I would behave accordingly now. Unfortunately for Anne, just a couple months after the first incident, her aunt went away on vacation and she asked her aunt to bring her back a souvenir. Again, her mother yelled at her, "No, we don't ask for presents. That's not nice." And the last step is the brain forming an automatic response to protect you in the future. So the next time Anne feels something similar, she feels this tightness in her stomach, she gets afraid, she gets ashamed, her brain is going to, before she even has time to think about it, just automatically, she's going to stay silent. She's not going to ask for something. So I was excited to see this because to me, clearly, this was linked with her ability, her lack of ability to ask for what she needed from her clients in terms of her pricing. So we were talking about this. I was really excited. I thought we had a great conversation. So before I get into how that ended, I want to point out that, okay, so number 5 here, the brain looks for evidence that confirms the belief. We always are doing this, except when the emotional memory is formed, it gets locked. And that means no matter how many times someone says, "It's okay, tell me what you want." If her grandmother, for example, said, "Oh, what do you want for your birthday? Tell me." She might still have this hesitancy to do that. Or, in other situations, even though It's a mismatch from the original knowing. It's locked. It's not going to accept any more information. So that is a problem because, and like most of us, we go around and we have these issues that we can't resolve. So in her case, it seemed to be a sales and a pricing problem. She just wasn't charging them enough. So before coming to me, she tried to solve these through other solutions that had to do with sales and pricing. Sales training, business coaching, maybe attending an imposter syndrome workshop, a marketing course. The problem with these is that they do absolutely nothing to unlock this root problem. It just piles on things on top of that. And I'm not saying that these methods are bad or harmful. They can work. They can work for a short period of time, or they can work a little bit on the surface level. But whenever a situation arises that triggers Anne to feel this feeling of, oh no, I can't speak at this time. I can't raise my voice. I can't ask for what I need in this situation. I'm going to be abandoned. Then all of this goes out the window. It never really gets to the core because this is blocked until you identify what it is and are able to unlock it. But how are you able to unlock it? Because when I was talking with Anne, all the steps seemed to be there. We identified the root problem. Oh, look, it must have been from this. And oh, look, yeah, of course your mother told you when you were 5 that it was rude to ask for things, but clients don't think it's rude for you to state your price. They're used to people saying, okay, this is how much I charge. You want to work with me or not? Great. But it wasn't working. And I could see from our conversation that it just wasn't, she was not having that connection that Marcus had. And so I later learned, reading these materials, that, and this is just to say that she was not making that link, that emotional knowings can only be unlocked under very specific conditions. And the process of doing this is called memory reconsolidation. So this is how it works. In order to unlock an emotional knowing, 3 conditions have to occur at the same time. The original memory is triggered and felt. This is really important. You have to be able to feel it. And some of us can't really feel much in our bodies, or we've been conditioned out of trusting that feeling, because this can even come before we have a clear memory of the event. This could be something that happened to us pre-verbal, before we even had language. In that case, it's only going to be a feeling, and it's not, you're not going to have the, clear language around it to describe what happened in the moment of the memory. So that is why if you feel like you have an emotional knowing, and you know that by having this, any problem that you try to resolve and nothing works for the long term, that's a really good indication that you have this emotional knowing that's locked. Working with a therapist, and especially someone who's trained in somatic therapy, is really good to help this connection of the mind and body so that you can feel into it. Okay, so number 1, the emotional memory has to be triggered and felt. It has to be alive in the body. And then a contrary belief, the mismatch, needs to be recognized. And really importantly, if you're working with someone else trying to do this, it needs to be true for that person. It can't be that you objectively think, oh, of course this mismatches that idea. It has to be felt, mismatched for the person. And then lastly, you have to feel the original feeling, but you can't feel it too much. It has to be within this range where you're not kind of dissociated, or you're not disembodied, you're not kind of out of it, but at the same time, you don't feel it so much that you're activated and feel in a state of panic and not thinking clearly, because the mismatch indicators only happen within this window of activation. Does that all make sense so far? Yep. And so this is why, so when I think back on it, when I had that conversation with Anne, I think she was too activated at the time, actually. And then when I think back on another client that I worked with who, like all the ingredients were there, it was like all laid out on the table and nothing happened during the course of our one-on-one work. I realized that she was not activated enough. And in that second client, she worked with me later in a group program, and it was just during some exercise. She was by herself, she did the exercise, and then she came online and said, oh my gosh, I just had a breakthrough, and it was just crazy, like a light switch. So the conditions have to be just right for this to happen. So how do you know if it happens? You'll know because if you're working with someone or if you're trying this on yourself, you can also do this on yourself. There's usually a sudden stillness, and then that's followed by some movement. Like you might see the eyes searching back and forth, laughter, which seems bizarre, but that's often a sign that it works. I've seen that happen. The laughter often comes because the emotional knowing and the mismatch are so crazy off sometimes. And so you can't believe that you once thought that this was true because it doesn't make any sense. And a sad example, in Marcus's case, his younger brother died of cancer. So of course he realized right away, like, oh my gosh, this doesn't even make any sense. I'm trying to protect my brother, but that was so long ago and he's not even with us, yet this behavior is carrying on. And then you'll know afterward because the presenting problem has vanished. So unfortunately, this doesn't always work. It's such a beautiful, amazing thing when it does. And yeah, this picture is a little out of character with the rest of the slides, but I couldn't help put it in because I feel like it really captures the feeling here. Like, oh, I want this beautiful thing. And oh, but I worked so hard, and why didn't this turn out the way I wanted it to? So these are some reasons why it might not have worked. Using your rational brain to try to figure it out instead of staying attuned to the feelings and letting them guide you. The feelings need to be front and center. That is what leads us to the unlocking. Level of arousal is either too low or too high. You're out of that window. Another thing, and this is common, the presenting problem is tied to multiple emotional knowings. So you might feel like some relief, but you're like, oh, but I just don't feel like I really got there. Then that's probably the issue here. The identified mismatch, it seems logically like a mismatch, but you just don't feel it. And again, that you can really feel like, oh, I really think it's this, that makes sense. But if you're not feeling it in your body, then that's not a mismatch. And it could be that your system is just not ready for this. This is not the right environment. You just don't feel safe enough in the moment. Maybe your mind is trying to protect you from something that just feels too dangerous and you're not ready in that moment to identify that. So where does memory reconsolidation occur? It can happen in a wide variety of places. It's not modality specific. So almost all, probably all therapies, anything, if you worked with a licensed therapist, all kinds of work could get you there. It just takes different forms. It can also happen outside of therapy. You can do this on yourself. I have done this a couple times on myself. I think at least 3 times successfully, and once or twice, maybe partly. And one of those success stories, that took me 3 or 4 attempts in order to get there. Drawing is one of my favorite ways to get there. because when we draw, we use our whole brain, and that includes all of the emotions, spiritual experiences, working with different coaches, retreats, workshops. There's so much. Okay, so for the key points, emotional learnings are at the root of behavior that we can't change regardless of what we try. Memory reconsolidation happens only under specific circumstances. You can't make it happen. You can't will it to happen, but you can create conditions where it's possible. And if you're looking for more resources, this book is fascinating. It has lots of client stories in there. Highly recommend it. If you really want to go more in depth, this training is awesome by Julianne Moore. I took it with her live, and now the recording is available through Therapy Wisdom. And if you just want to pick my brain, I'm happy to talk about this stuff. So just get in touch with me, send me an email, and we can chat. If you'd like to explore holistic money coaching, this is one element of it. Get in touch with me. And I also have, coming up next week, I'm giving a Draw Your Way to a Better Relationship with Money workshop, which is a fundraiser. So it's a really awesome, affordable way to try to see if you can have an experience like this around anything regarding your relationship with money, which is basically anything. So I will stop my screen share. Let's see if you have any questions.
Emily, I want to just wrap this up and then we'll take questions off camera. But I want to thank you. I'd like for everyone here with us on Zoom to unmute yourself so we can applaud and yell and whoop it up for Emily and thank her for this amazing presentation. So here we go.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That is so fascinating. And it's just, yeah. So anytime we've had like, oh, I get it now, one of those I get it now moments, even sometimes we're not even trying to, it's just that all the things are aligned that you talked about. And it's like, oh, it makes such sense now, right? And that's a change. That's a moment of transformation. So thank you so much for that. And I want to thank anyone who's watching this live or the replay. If you want to join us for any of our Zoom gatherings or in person, go to my website, opwgc.com, where you can find out all about the community and the magazine. And that website is also in the text of this video. Thanks for watching, everyone.